Alright, this is Pie Explode. Welcome to this episode. This is a special feature on the Red, Blue and Yellow Little Cup UU, or underused tier, which is quite special. It's, well, on the Red, Blue and Yellow 2010 site, which I thoroughly recommend checking out those forums. They include tierings of their first generation of Little Cup. They're done non-wrap, which is a bit of a pest, because I do prefer a wrap meta, but it does include tiering right down to the underused tier, which permits a total of 11 Pokemon. These are Venonat, Ekans, Cubone, Jigglypuff, Nidoran, both male and female, Goldeen, Magikarp, Zubat, Weedle, and Caterpie. Now, obviously, once you look through Caterpie, Magikarp, and Weedle's move pools, you realise that they're effectively useless and you're playing a tier with 8 viable Pokemon. So, that leads to very precise team building and the way that you play, and also perhaps, I guess, the probabilistic effects affecting the game a lot more than any team building could. So, let's move on first. We're going to look at those Pokemon which are omnipresent, then those ones that are viable, and then those that simply aren't. We'll have a quick look over at the end. So first we're going to start with Venonat, which is virtually a necessity in this tier. It's the only Pokemon which can use a sleeping move. It has access to Sleep Powder, and also Psychic, which hits almost the whole tier super effectively, and it's its strongest move versus virtually every Pokemon. And interestingly, because that covers so much, it's a question of what else fits to complete your moveset. Typical options include Stun Spore, Mega Drain, Disable, Substitute, and the like, but very few of them are actually usable. The best ones are probably Substitute and Stun Spore, I find, since once you set something to sleep 3/4 of the time, then you're able to set up a Substitute and then start attacking until something switches in and paralyze it. But certainly it's got a lot of costs and risk associated with it. Whilst it's a great Pokemon, it's live fast, die young, I guess. And not sending something to sleep can be fatal for it, since it is outsped by Goldeen, Ekans, and Zubat, which, as we'll see, is very key to how you play the metagame. But yeah, that's general what Venonat does, and we'll discuss leading at the end of the second section. Next, we'll have a look at Goldeen. Now, it's a bit bizarre. It doesn't really seem like much on first glance. Sure, it's as fastest tied with Ekans and Zubat, but it doesn't seem to have any special traits. What it does actually have is it has access to Double Edge, Blizzard, Surf, and a few other cool moves like Substitute and Agility, accompanied by really relatively good bulk for this tier to only be 3-hit KO'd perhaps by some moves. Possibly even 4. Great typing that doesn't mean it's weak to Psychic or Ground, which is absolutely fantastic in this tier, but at the same time its coverage only really offers neutral, hitting everything and hitting Cubone a lot harder. So what I tend to run is Double Edge, Blizzard or Surf, Agility, and Substitute, since it does often get a chance to put up a Substitute, which can be quite surprising and can give it an edge versus Venonat even. Blizzard or Surf is whichever you wish to hit Cubone with. Surf is obviously Stab, but most Pokemon are hit pretty much by the same power by both, so not a big deal with that one. and agility is useful if, for lack of anything else, allowing it to outspeed everything even when it's paralyzed. So yeah, that's what Goldeen does. It sounds very poor when you first hear about it and look at it, but after playing several games you realize that actually it's one of the best Pokemon, and one that you can't really afford to drop. It just offers that speed, that power, that bulk altogether, but at the same time it's not straightforward how you're supposed to use it best. Right, another omnipresent one is Cubone. Then it's slower than Venonat, which is quite costly, but it does have some unique traits. For a start, its coverage is immense, able to hit the whole tier super effectively with moves such as Earthquake, Submission, Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Fire Blast even. Actually, I'm not sure if it gets Thunderbolt, but yeah, point is it hits everything in the tier very hard. I'm sure it's the only Pokemon that can one-hit KO something, which is likely to happen during a match since its Earthquake one-hit KOs Ekans and quite possibly the Nidorans, which is quite a feat in itself, especially since Ekans can't do anything much back stronger than a Giga Drain, which only does around 20%. So yeah, it's effectively an Ekans counter, but it suffers from really low speed. Choosing what moves though, Fire Blast, Blizzard, and Earthquake are all highly recommended for hitting Venonat, opposing Cubone, and the massive amounts of poisons super effectively. Submission is an option to hit Jigglypuff harder. You know, it's sort of a good all-round mon. Substitute Body Slam usable as well, and don't forget it's got probably the best defense in the tier in the long run, and that allows it to soak up the neutral hits from all sorts, Goldeen and Ekans if it has to, with quite a lot of skill. It's just built for doing that. So yeah, that's that one. And I think the other one which you'll really see on almost every team is Ekans, or every serious team. Even though it's not quite as good as the other three that I've mentioned, I feel. It does generally seem to merit a place. Its options, Glare fits on every set. It does miss Wrap not being allowed, but I wonder whether if Wrap was allowed in the tiering it would even still be UU. But point is that it isn't, and it's here. So it's got powerful Glare, Earthquake, Double Edge, Rock Slide, Mega Drain, but really, I don't know, personally I've never found it to put in much work, but Earthquake and Double Edge hit the tier very nicely. Rock Slide notably hits Venonat and Zubat super effectively, speed tying with the former and outspeeding the latter, which is highly helpful. So yeah, those are the ones that you want to use pretty much every time. And then you get the sort of the remaining two slots. You've got the Nidorans, which Nidoran, the female version, is generally not worth running. This is because the male version is faster, it speed touches Venonat and outspeeds Cubone, whereas the female one, whilst it has the slower speed, cheers. I'm doing a thing, Ayla. Sorry, that's my sister interrupting me. But, yeah, distracted. I can't pause it. But, yeah, Nidorans. The female one can substitute 4 times, whereas the male one can only do it 3 times, but they're not that good with substitute that it's not worth running it unless you run them both together, which is also kind of poor. So yeah, but the male version you probably want to be running moves such as substitute, body slam, blizzard, thunderbolt. Options such as that tend to be its best options, hitting with strong neutral super effective coverage. But I don't know, I don't always include it actually. Jigglypuff, which most players I know tend to stick with, but I think Jellicent is keen on not always using, and probably has the widest usable move pool of the whole tier pretty easily. I'm gonna open the team builder and look even at the moves that it gets, because it just has so many. But the best ones, well, really, Thunder Wave, Psychic, but I mean it also gets Blizzard, Body Slam, Counter, Fire Blast, Mega Kick, which I've seen used by Marco, Reflect, which is kind of poor, Sing, which is worth legitimately putting in a couple sometimes, Submission, yeah, quite a variety of options, some better than others. I must admit I really can't recommend a standard set for it. Just do what you feel is best for your team, but that one, I don't think most players run the same sets on it. So, big variable, even though I find it doesn't usually do too much, which is probably why Jellicent doesn't adopt it so much. And then there's one last one, which is Zubat, which is one which a lot of my friends neglect. Probably the one in this list that's least popular. It does have not much going for it. It has, however, got base 15 speed, a ground immunity, but at the cost of weaknesses to Rock, Ice, and Psychic, which will absolutely hurt. And I think now is probably the right time to sort of start talking about leads. Typically, there's maybe 4 of them that get chosen. Venonat, which is one of the best, it allows you to get the early sleep off, which is pretty useful. But I don't know, often it can be just as good mid-game, so that's sort of a preference choice. Ekans is really great for allowing you to really sort of sack it to sleep, even though it can't usually wake up, because it will hit Venonat hard and guarantee that hit, which is something that no other Pokemon really can guarantee. But again, you're risking losing it a lot, and it also tends to do quite a bit of damage to itself in mirror matches, so it's not a sort of winning a speed tie, winning overall sort of matchup when you get a mirror Ekans lead. Zubat, which is one that I've tested quite a bit in the lead spot, although I think I'm preferring running it in the middle of the team, since Venonat often comes out mid-game, and its best option really is handling Venonat. Double Edge is absolutely mandatory because that hits every Pokemon as hard as it can. Wing Attack is used very rarely, depending on player preference, but it's effectively a double edge without recoil versus Venonat and weak versus everything else. But then again, it doesn't run hugely much. I personally run double edge, substitute, supersonic, and mimic, which gives it some sort of shot in Confuse Ray, even not supersonic. Given that if you Confuse Ray as a Venonat at the first thing, then it only has about a 3 in 8 chance of sending you to sleep. And if it psychics you, you're not dead, you can even put up a substitute. And Mimic, if you steal Sleep Powder, or Psychic, or Hex Sunspore, then Zubat's really done a good job. Causing havoc there with Venonat. And goodness knows, if it gets Psychic, it can sleep a little bit as well, which is pretty hellish, if you get lucky, but it's inherent Pokemon within this tier, and I'm not totally sure if I should recommend it or think that it's good, but it's certainly not useless. So yeah, those are the main Pokemon you want to use, and it does help knowing the red, blue, and yellow mechanics. Generally remembering stuff like abilities don't exist, and knowing your resistances, and yeah, that stuff. Obviously, rap mechanics are different, but they're not used in this tier. If something gets frozen, you're buggered. And Substitute does not block most status. It blocks Toxic, which you won't see ever in this tier, and Confused Ray, which is helpful versus Zubat, but it doesn't block Stun Spore, Sleep Powder, Thunder Wave, Sing, those moves. So yeah, that's sort of it, and then I'll leave you with sort of some lasting remarks around the other three Pokemon. You've got Weedle, which is, it would be happier if it did get a stab, but it just has nothing going for it. And Magikarp, whilst it's faster than everything else, has no firepower, with only Tackle. And Caterpie I almost tried using once, because it does actually have some positive traits, but unfortunately they're not enough. It does have a ground resistance, unlike, well, the whole of the rest of the tier, which is in itself not utterly useless. But the lack of a strong stab or even a strong attack doesn't allow it to function as a sort of a late game sweeper like you might hope it does, even though it is quick enough and bulky enough in comparison with the rest of the tier. It's simply way underpowered. So yeah, that's that. But hey, it's a tier where Caterpie is nearly viable. I mean, what's not exciting and strange about that? So yeah, I hope you enjoy this tier. Try it out. We're holding a tournament on Pokemon Perfect, but that's already underway. But if I see interest in it, I can always hold another. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed.